we'll get started, and if anybody else comes in, we obviously have plenty of room. Welcome to Gluten-Free Diet and Food Allergies. I'm your presenter. I'm Kathy LeBarre. I'm the dietitian, outpatient dietitian at Spectrum Health Blodgett Hospital. I've been in that role for about 10 years with an emphasis on digestive disease and celiac disease as well. Part of my role as counseling patients is to help them understand nutritional adequacy, understanding, the new things they may need to experience with their diet, and helping find resources. Sometimes patients do want me to know specifically lots of products that may or may not be gluten-free or allergen-free, and honestly, I do look a lot of things up as well, kind of expecting the patient to become the expert, and we'll help focus on your nutrition. We have a rather small group today, so we might be able to be a little bit more interactive. How many of you are new to celiac or new to some food allergies? So hopefully we have some good information that we can provide to you. If you come up with questions anytime during the presentation, please feel free to stop me, and we'll do this kind of informal as well. Our objectives today are to identify grains safe to consume on a gluten-free diet, list the top 8 food allergens, and identify foods appropriate for both gluten-free diet and specific food allergies, ending with some listings and a handout that you'll all receive at the end with some ideas. Before we get into the specifics of diet and food allergies, we want to talk about mypyramid.gov, which promotes general health, healthy lifestyle for the general population even before you have food restrictions. It encourages foods from all of our food groups, encouraging grains, vegetables, fruits, milk, meat and beans, fat and oils. Our grain group obviously is the most affected with the gluten-free diet, and we're encouraged to eat at least 6 ounces a day. Ounces really translates into servings. So a slice of bread, 3/4 of a cup of dry cereal, 1/2 a cup of cooked cereal. Also encouraging that at least 1/2 of those servings be whole grain or fiber containing, and that becomes a little bit more difficult with some of the gluten-free products depending on the choices you make, and that's something we hope to enlighten you on today. Vegetables, eating 2.5 cups daily or 3 to 5 servings, with a cup of raw vegetables being a serving and 1/2 a cup of cooked vegetables being a serving. Fruits, 2 cups daily. 1/2 a cup canned would be considered a serving, or a small to medium raw fruit. Milk, encouraging 3 cups daily, or for children 2 to 8, it would be 2 cups. Milk or meat and beans, 5.5 ounces daily. The average American eats a lot more out of this food group than is recommended anyway. However, if you think of a restaurant, for example, you can't always find a piece of meat for less than 6 ounces, and we're saying you only need 5.5 ounces daily, so that one isn't too hard to meet. Fats and oils, limiting your intake as well as encouraging those to be the healthier fats. Moving on to objective 1, we want to identify grains safe to consume on a gluten-free diet. But in order to use that positive approach, first we need to look at the grains that we need to avoid. This is probably one of the first things you learned with the gluten-free diet, that you need to avoid wheat, rye, barley, and oats unless they're gluten-free. And then some of the more unique terms for them: bulgur, couscous, gram flour, kamut, matzo, spelt, triticale. And this list is not all-inclusive of the terms you need to avoid, for example, malt barley, but I just wanted to include some of those so that we could look at the more positive side of things that are allowed, grains that are allowed for you. Not all of these are familiar, and we will be talking more about them. First, we have our common grains: corn, gluten-free oats, legumes, which are actually beans, potato, rice, soy. With corn, legumes, potatoes, they're not technically grains, but you do find in a gluten-free diet where they're used in more of the flours, some of the replacements items for baking, and they still provide a nutritious source of carbohydrates as well as your energy source. The more unique grains are amaranth, pure buckwheat, and we'll define that in a little bit, flax, millet, quinoa, and sorghum. They're naturally whole grains that can help make your diet more nutritious. Our second objective is to list the top 8 food allergens. Wheat, milk, eggs, soybeans, tree nuts, which includes almonds, Brazil nuts, pine nuts, and walnuts, peanuts, fish, and crustacean shellfish, which is your shrimp, crab, lobster, clams, oysters. Identifying foods appropriate for both the gluten-free diet and your specific food allergies is our third objective, and we'll be tying the other 2 objectives into this as well. With this objective, I think people's needs are maybe different depending on what your specific allergies are, if it's eggs versus milk that you may have in addition to the gluten-free diet. Having allergies in addition to the gluten-free diet further limits your food choices. And with that further restriction, now we're looking at nutritional adequacy being an issue. The gluten-free diet is already potentially low in B vitamins, iron, calcium, and fiber, with the limitation of specific nutrients possibly being worse depending on what your added allergies are. If a person has a wheat allergy, sometimes they may have been told they have a wheat allergy and they discover later that it is actually celiac disease. So then at that point, you're adding the rye, barley, and non-gluten-free oats to that restriction. It is important to remember that when a product states wheat-free on the label, that does not mean gluten-free. Now, we look more into the gluten-free grains, and I have some of them up here for display if you're not familiar with them. Amaranth is more of a seed. Buckwheat, despite its name, is not actually related to the wheat family. Here I have an actual mix that uses buckwheat as a whole grain. The biggest thing is you want to make sure it's pure buckwheat, and you want to use caution if you buy it in the form of like pancake mix or a cookie type mix that calls for buckwheat. A lot of times they will be mixed with wheat, so reading the labels becomes very important for that. Flax is something that many people are familiar with. It's a little bit more common, at least in the media. Flax can serve 2 different purposes. If the flax is ground up, it's going to give us its nutrient benefit or the nutritional benefit so your body can actually absorb that nutrition. And if the flax is left in whole seeds, like you might find it in breads, then it's going to provide more of a fiber benefit. Mesquite, you'll find more as a flower. Mesquite comes from a woody type tree which produces a bean pod, and they grind these bean pods into a flour. The nutritional value of the mesquite kind of varies depending on when they've cultured or harvested the bean pods. Millet, I think I have some whole grain millet here. I've seen it also puffed into like a dry cereal as well. Small, round seed, it's kind of compared to like corn. I think some of these grains, it just takes trying things to see what you like and trying them in different varieties. Montina, or Indian rice grass, is a black seed that's harvested into or ground into a flour and added to baked goods to help boost the nutritional profile of what you're making. Quinoa is this little grain here, and you could replace it in rice in your dishes. It has one of the highest nutritional profiles of the other grains. It has a very good protein source to it. It's a good source of fiber, and it's very versatile. You can eat it as a hot cereal. You can eat it as a salad. In fact, the recipe pack that I am providing to you has a recipe in there for a quinoa salad that even your non-gluten requiring family would probably like. Sorghum is also known as milo, and it's little round seeds. They come in a red color or a white color. Again, it's just learning what to do with them, and I realize that's sometimes the challenge, but you're also going to see different flours that are made from some of these grains, and just recognizing, oh, that's a whole grain, or that has a higher nutritional content might be helpful. Teff is a grain that's used in making an Ethiopian flatbread sourdough called injera. Now, if you buy it at an American restaurant, perhaps you do need to be aware if wheat has been added to it. But if it's in its pure form, it is considered gluten-free. And finally, we have the wild rice, which actually is not part of the rice family, but it does make a good complement. So you'd see it added to the rice or to other grains, kind of providing a nutty flavor, another good fiber content. The one thing all of these grains have in common, being whole grains, they provide good sources of B vitamins, which are necessary, fiber, protein, magnesium, zinc, potassium, phosphorus kind of varies between them, but they are highly nutritious, and I just recommend giving them a try into your diet. If you have the gluten-free diet that you're following and you also have a soy and corn food allergy, or either or, yes, that's going to limit some more of your choices. Corn tortillas, corn chips, some of those things that are relatively easy are now knocked out if you're not able to have those. Soy and corn are both in a lot of processed foods, and as we'll see in some of the examples, it's kind of getting away from some of those processed foods is going to help eliminate some of that label reading. It's kind of back to the basics for eating. Egg allergy, while it seems rather simple just to avoid eating, for example, eggs for breakfast, eggs do play a role in baking. And with gluten-free baking, that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. They may be providing liquid to the product to help with moisture. They may be helping bind things together so they don't fall apart, or they might be helping to provide some of the leavening. In reading your recipe, if you can identify what it's doing, you can make substitutions. If it's a liquid, perhaps you can use juice, you can use milk, you can even use water. If it's providing the leavening, you can use ground flaxseed mixed with some water, or if it's doing the binding, the xanthan gum or guar gums. If you've read any recipes or tried to do any baking, xanthan gum is called for in a lot of those, which is not something you see in regular non-gluten type recipes. Have any of you experimented or had to purchase the xanthan gum? It comes in a rather large bag, but that's kind of the role it's playing, and it does help provide texture to the product. Milk allergy, lactose intolerance. There's two different reasons that milk gets excluded from the diet. It might be lactose intolerance, and sometimes you may have that even before you get diagnosed with the celiac disease. Your body's not tolerating the milk sugars. If the lactose intolerance is secondary to the celiac disease, then you may be able to tolerate milk or dairy products as your body heals on that gluten-free diet. However, if you have a true milk allergy, then it is to the protein, and then you can be thankful to know there are a lot of different substitutes. Almond milk, as long as that's not on your allergy list. Coconut milk, there's rice milk, soy milk, a lot of different varieties. So even with some of your, even depending on your allergies, there's still different varieties. They come in unsweetened, they come in flavors, they come in higher fat versions, lower fat versions, so you can kind of fit what your needs are. And I think it's just kind of trial and error to see what it is that you actually prefer. The coconut milk, almond milk, soy, and rice milk. It is encouraged to look for products that are fortified with calcium and the vitamins A and D. I think all these brands here are, and I think most of them are these days, just because that is such an important group. If you have a tree nut, peanut, fish, and crustacean allergy, they have a little bit less of an impact. The tree nut or peanut may limit a few of the gluten-free sources in terms of, I know some of there are nut flours that you have to be aware of. I know some of like the almond products or the different nut crackers that you may have found even downstairs. The Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act, also known as FALCA, is a labeling law that went into effect in 2004 and required that food labels clearly state their allergen on the food label. They had until the beginning of 2006 to make this clear. It allowed the shelf stock to get rotated. However, it does not include barley, oats, rye, or corn. So you still have to read labels. Label reading is an ongoing thing, and knowing that labels can change. So you need to always read your food labels. Moving into some breakfast ideas, lunch ideas, dinner ideas, snack ideas. I've given some different ideas. They're also included in your packet, probably with a few extras as well. But just kind of encouraging you to think maybe what you ate before, what kind of changes you can make, and knowing that you might have to adjust some of this for A, your individual food allergies, and B, your personal taste preferences. I think as you start on a gluten-free diet, there is also some adjustment just to maybe some of the different textures that you find. Some of the flours have different mouthfeels, and it's just figuring out exactly what you like. Getting back into, again, those basics. Your fruits and vegetables are gluten-free naturally, so we can look for a lot of the naturally gluten-free things and make things easier. Our first example, for example, rice Chex with milk topped with blueberries. A cold cereal. Just a simple, basic breakfast. It's nice that there are becoming more and more products available, mainstream things. You don't have to necessarily go to the specialty stores. Our local stores, Meijer's, the Spartan stores, D&W, Family Fare, are all making things much easier, whether they have specialized sections in their stores or they're willing to carry products. If your particular store doesn't have something, by all means ask the manager. I was in a store last week as I was preparing for today, and the manager asked me if he could help me with anything, and I was looking for some quinoa type products, and he didn't have any, but he did take my interest down and said he had heard more about that, and he was actually going to start looking into it. So the demand is out there. You can see by the response downstairs that people have this need, and we just have to communicate it with the grocery stores if we want them to get those products. So getting back to our different ideas, hard-boiled egg, fruit, some gluten-free toast, some yogurt, just different ideas. Record what your ideas are. Write down what you've been eating. A lot of people become sort of habit related, where you might eat the same thing for several days in a row, but then you forget about it because maybe you ran out of your favorite brand of cracker or toast, or the season was wrong for the berries or something. then you can go back and say, you know what, look, we were eating that back then. Or looking at things that work for the entire family if only one person is affected by the celiac disease. Lunch ideas, if you have to work or go to school, that makes another issue. There are more and more convenience products, or you can consider making your own. If you have leftovers from a meal, consider putting them in like Tupperware or Gladware type containers and save them for the next day. Have things ready, freeze them, then you'll have your own convenience meals. Simple things, a baked potato topped with some vegetables and cheese or cheese alternate fruit. Beans and rice were rolled into a corn tortilla. Salads with grilled chicken. If you tend to eat out more at lunch, be familiar with what restaurants offer a gluten-free menu. There were many downstairs, and some of which I was not familiar with. If they don't have a menu that's gluten-free, be able to think basic. And again, that's kind of our thought for today, is thinking basic and thinking healthy. Again, dinner ideas, just think a meat, a starch, a vegetable. Our diet so often in American way has gotten away from eating the vegetables. Maybe try going to the farmer's market or growing your own tomato plant or something to make you think of, how can I incorporate more vegetables or fruits into my diet? If eating fruits or vegetables really isn't your thing, then you may need to say, okay, I still have a role, for example, for some convenience bars. There is a recipe in your packet for a Choco Current cranberry bar. So there's things that you can make, and you can adjust things to meet your own needs if you find that you just can't find a bar that you like or that's in a cost that you prefer. Snacks. Again, snacks, we can still think healthy, trying to get the good nutrition in that your body needs. Fruits, again, vegetables with hummus, a gluten-free cookie, and let's just add a glass of milk or milk substitute. Popcorn, corn chips and salsa, a lot of those are kind of basic, normal snacks. So with the conclusion of my part of talking, we just want to remind you to focus on your foods that are allowed. Sometimes it's easier to tell when people say, well, what can't you eat? If you're going to someone's house, remind them, this is what you can eat, perhaps giving them an idea of what you can eat, or offering to take something with you. Being open to trying new things is important, and maybe it's only one thing at a time. If any of these grains is of interest, maybe you try a grain and say, you know what, we'll try this a few different ways. I think there's a certain learning curve on how it's prepared or how you're going to use it, so that you can know that that's something you can do. And think basic. Again, back to, years ago it was the basic 4 food groups. Think of your milks, your meats, your fruits, your vegetables. Let's think how we can do that without all the additives which tend to introduce more of our potential allergens. A registered dietitian can be of help. If you haven't met with a dietitian, meeting with a dietitian who is knowledgeable with the gluten-free diet and food allergies can help make sure that you are getting nutritional adequacy and your needs are being met. I have references also listed in your packet with some books that may be of benefit if you need some more information. And now, with such a small group, I want to make sure that I've met the needs of everybody and see what kind of questions I can answer for you.